Good evening, guys, and welcome to the Kitesurf question answer session. I apologise in advance if I've caught a few of you out with the timings. I realised I'd said it for 7 o'clock, and I'm actually in the UK. The time it was kind of advertised for is an hour in the future. So I may have thrown a load of people out here. So if I have done that, I apologise. I'm actually in the UK. I apologise for that. Let's see if anyone actually shows up or if I've bamboozled everybody with the timings totally. But anyway, we've got a question in the hopper from Brett. As always, guys, usual thing. If you've got any questions, stick them in the chat. I'll go through them as I get to them. If I miss you, keep sticking it in there just in case, because it's often that I don't see it or that chat deletes it or chat doesn't get through or whatever reason like that. This is going to be a bit of a shorter session today. It's going to be a half-hour session because I've got to run off at 6:30 UK time to disappear from there. So if you do have questions, get them in the chat nice and quick so we can bang through them. As I say, I'm not sure anyone's going to turn up because I think I managed to bamboozle most people with the time here. So I apologise about that once again. Very, very sorry. Brett's asked a question in the Facebook group. He's looking to get into an unhooked riding, and he's wondering how to control the power. Really good question, and actually really simple answer, Brett. What you want to be doing is before you unhook, start pointing your board downwind. And then as you're riding unhooked, keep riding downwind. Basically, you won't be overpowered at all. In fact, you're more likely to be underpowered as long as you're heading down, as long as it's in a nice wind, as long as you're heading downwind. As soon as you start to turn upwind, you're going to feel your arms start to get ripped out. So it's all controlled with the board. Again, so what you want to be making sure you're doing, okay, riding downwind, or riding normally, point your board downwind, unhook, keep riding, la 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 la. You can play around a little bit like this. Start to edge upwind and start feeling that power coming on, but get ready to go downwind again. And then come back and keep doing the same thing, just working it like that until you start to understand the power. And in fact, when you see the really good guys and they're unhooking, what they're doing is they unhook, and they unhook right at the last minute, just as they carve upwind. So just as they kind of hit the pop, they get in the power from that carve upwind. So they'll often unhook very slightly downwind, and then they'll, on the S part of the pop, so the part when they're heading downwind, that's when you unhook. Then they carve back hard, pop, and then they release from the wood. So they're not getting their arms pulled out of the sockets because they're traveling with the kite through the air. And then they land pointing downwind, hooking, and ride off again. So make sure that you're heading downwind. That's the key to controlling the power with unhooked. Whenever you start being overpowered and hooked, head further downwind. Now, that only works to a point, obviously, because, if you're super, super overpowered, that's not going to work. So what a lot of people do as well is they'll play with the trim. You might trim your kite in. You might depower it before you start unhooking. Again, that depends on the kite and how it's going to perform as you unhook, as you depower, so to speak. So I would play with that on your particular kite, but the top tip is head downwind. That's the easiest way of controlling the power straight out of the gate. Also asked about suicide, pros and cons. Really, really simple. The pro of suicide is if you are unhooked, you don't lose your kite, but B, your kite doesn't automatically depower if you let go of the bar. It means your kite stays on full power, which is a massive pro if you're learning to unhook, because you're going to be dropping the bar quite a lot, most probably, especially when you start doing things like handle passes. Not so much if you're just starting to unhook and doing railies and, unhooked back rolls and things like that. But especially when you start doing the handle pass, you are going to be dropping the kite a lot. And if you don't want to have to do a self-rescue every time, you want it on suicide. So you can just pull the kite back in, off you go. The downside is obviously you've disabled your safety. So now you've got no safety system as such. So you've got to be very confident in what you're doing, that you're not going to need your safety or how to activate your safety while you're on suicide before you do it. So they're the basic pros and cons of kind of suicide riding versus. And for those of you who don't know what suicide is basically where rather than attaching your leash to the flag line, you would attach it either directly to the donkey, the chicken loop, or some point on the bar where it's not going to activate the flag line, basically. Often you get flag line loops now that have like a loop with another hook on it. So you can hook the loop through the chicken loop, and then you've got another loop to hook onto for your leash. which means that you're riding suicide, but it's nice and neat. And you still do have a safe system in that sense, because as you eject, it kind of comes out and pulls through that way. So that would be the ideal solution, is find a bar that's got one of those systems, like your double ring. So you've got a larger ring, there's like a smaller ring. So it looks like a figure eight coming off it. That's the single best solution that you can have for the whole problem there. So I hope that helps you, Brett. Again, any question, any comes back on that, quicker session today. It's only a half-hour session. I've buggered up the time, but I've only got half an hour as well today. So if you do have questions, stick them in the chat and let's go from there, because that is all we've got in the hopper for today. No, I think I've probably managed to confuse the hell out of everyone by changing the times at the last minute. So if anyone's got a question, stick it in the chat. I'll give it 5 minutes anyway. See if people do turn up. People are often a bit late, but as I say, having changed the time last. This is the normal time, but I'd advertised on our Facebook group at least that it was going to be an hour later, thinking I was in Spain. And looking out the window today, actually, you could imagine you were in Spain. It was beautiful today here. I think it's raining in Tarifa, so I felt quite smug actually. Any questions? Can someone out there just type in the chat? I'm just getting nothing on the chat at the moment. It may be that no one's typed anything, but normally by this time someone's at least said hi. So I'm just checking that chat's working. Google Hangouts has changed a little bit, which is the program that I'm using for these things. I'm not quite certain if it's all up and running properly as it was before, if there's some new mechanism that I'm not spotting. If you can just type something in the chat, even if it's just, yeah, we're here or whatever. Oh, there we go. Cool. Yeah, people are there. Nice one, Matt. How are you, sir? Good to have you here. Okay, so chat's working. Any questions? No, everyone good? Everyone good this week? I'll give it another few minutes just to check. As I say, guys, short session today. It's only going to be till 1:30. Hi, the local 3219. Toe-side riding tips. The biggest mistakes we see people making toe-side is trying to ride too far upwind. So people often try and go 180. So they go from heel side straight round to toe side and try and ride off in the same direction. You are much less efficient toe side. So what is often better is, rather going 180, go kind of 140, 150, something like that, 160 degrees round. So you're not quite riding across the wind. So you give yourself a little bit of a chance to pick up speed downwind. Now, then the other problem comes is that people don't get far enough round and they ride off too far downwind and lose power. That can be another one as well. Both seem similar, because both what happens is you switch, and then within about 3 or 4 or 5 seconds, you start to lose power and stall. So play with both of them. Play going around not quite so far, and play. Maybe if you find that you're not normally not going around far enough, try going around a bit further and really engaging the edge. Because the other mistake people make on toe side is you don't engage the edge hard enough. You tend to ride the board a lot flatter, which tends to drag you off downwind. So suddenly you're not resisting the kite anymore. You're just being pulled downwind, which reduces the apparent wind in the kite, which stalls you. So it can be several things at this point. It can be trying to flip too far around, not flipping too far around enough, or not engaging the edge hard enough. People tend to stand up a lot more when you're riding toe side. Think about the angle that you're riding at heel side and try and translate that onto toe side. And often it's a lot more than you think. So you need to really kind of fling your nose forward. So your nose is kind of, almost touching the water, so to speak. So you really need to get yourself over a lot further than you think. The other problem with riding toe side is it's much more difficult to control the kite, because generally you are flying now with one hand, because it's really awkward to get your other hand around to steer the kite. So it could just be that you need to fly the kite a bit harder on your toe side. So you need to really try and keep moving the kite. If you're a little bit underpowered heel side, you're going to be a lot more underpowered toe side. So it might just be that you're not working the kite enough as well as you go into toe side. I know that happens an awful lot. People riding okay heel side, but not super lit. Switch to toe side and suddenly I just can't keep going because I just can't move the kite enough. I can't sine wave the kite enough to keep moving. So they're kind of the top 4, and it's not an easy one to diagnose without seeing what's going on. Often it's all of these at once. It's a bit of not moving the kite enough, it's a bit of not engaging the edge enough, and it's a bit of hitting the wrong angle as you come around. So again, if you're slightly less powered up, you'd want to do less than 180 degrees. If you're very well powered, you want to go 180 degrees, but you always want to make sure you're engaging the edge, because that's probably the key one, is that people don't engage the edge enough. They ride the board too flat and they drag off down without even realizing it. They kind of dragging off downwind. Yeah, I think it probably is, mate. It generally is. It's rarely with these things it's one thing. It's often a combination of different things. But the keystone one, if you like, for me is that edge. Make sure the edge is engaged. People tend to ride toe side much flatter, and you'll see a lot of people when they're first riding toe side, they're almost stood up, just like a beginner would be when they're riding heel side, but they stood up and their head is pretty much over the middle of the board. Again, get that head right out so that you're on the edge, so you're riding on your toes. And generally, when you're riding toe side and you're nicely powered, it's almost, I wouldn't say it's painful, but you can really feel the pressure pushing through your toes. There's really an awful lot of pressure pushing down on the board through those toes to keep that edge engaged, because you think, your heel is a solid object and it runs straight down from your hips. It's very easy to apply power to your heel. So you don't tend to notice it when you're riding heel side. When you're riding toe side, your toes are much weaker than your entire leg put together. So it's a lot more pressure being felt through your toes as you're driving those toes through the board. So if you're not feeling it in your toes, it's probably that there's not enough edge going in there, is what I would say. So yeah, go out and give those, keep those in mind, and maybe give those a whiz when you're out there, mate. And toe side is more difficult because you are a lot less efficient naturally at toe side, and a lot of it comes down to not being able to move the kite, not being able to react as fast because you can't remove the kite. So you have to make up for that with very, very good technique. So I would, again, try it on, if you're really, really struggling, try it on a day when you're slightly overpowered on your heel side, and then see how you get on. You probably find it a lot easier, actually, because you are much less efficient. It's like, right, I've got to engage an edge, otherwise it feels like I'm going to get ripped off downwind. And suddenly, wow, I can do this. So maybe when you don't go out super overpowered, but just when you're nicely powered toe side, then try slipping into toes. When you're nicely powered heel side, then try flipping into toe side and see how you get on there. That's what I would suggest with that. Excuse me. See my new haircut, guys. No one's commenting on my new haircut. I thought it was the whole rage today. I've got all my locks chopped off the other day. I know I swore I wasn't going to do it, but it was driving me crazy. Barber's floor was filled with hair. Felt like a new dog. Any more questions, guys? Not about my hair. Don't ask, Matt. Don't ask. Stalled horrifically at the moment. Stalled horrifically. I will update as soon as I have an update, basically, on that one. Oh, my bucket list of places to kite in the world. Oh, that's a good question, to be honest. You know, I can't say I've actually got one, to be honest. I just like going anywhere. I just like going any new place and trying to kite. You know, I don't really care if it's the most kind of exotic place in the world or Blackpool. You know, not that there's anything wrong with Blackpool for those of you in Blackpool, but you know what I mean. I just like new environments. To be fair, and I'd love to say, oh, Jaws and things like that, but at the moment, I'm nowhere near good enough to ride in somewhere like that. So I suppose those would be my bucket list of places. But obviously, a lot of my bucket list places would be dependent on me being a hell of a lot better than I am. So my bucket list would be places like Punta Preta, you know, when it's really going off down there, Nazar, places like that. Mauritius, One Eye, you know, those kind of places would be my bucket list, so to speak. But yeah, I need to get a little bit better before I go to those places, I would have said. But in general, I just like riding in any different, in loads of different. You know, went snow kiting, I really enjoyed that. I went out in Scarborough the other week and really enjoyed that. I was out in Tarifa last week and really enjoyed that. Was up in Portugal the week before, loads of different places through Portugal, and that was amazing. Morocco, you know, the whole coast of Morocco, places where spots where, you know, the great thing about kitesurfing is that you know, what works one day doesn't necessarily work the next. Often the bucket list is just like, well, actually, I just want to find somewhere new and go riding and be the first or second person out there, you know, be the only person with a couple of mates on the water. So that's kind of what appeals to me about kiting more than having a bucket list, because bucket list places tend to be bloody busy, is what I've generally found. And you know, you can get to a bucket list place and there's no wind. So this is kind of the mistress that we all live and die by in kite surfing. So I try not to, you know, I used to do that for sure when I first started. I have all these places, I've got to go there, and I went to half of them and there was no wind. I was like, oh, this is just stupid. You know, why don't you just enjoy the places that you're at when they have wind and learn to do that? So I kind of tend to try and shy away from that whole idea of having a bucket list of places, if that makes sense. Oh, it's no big deal, man. It'll come back. It'll come back. It's just been the worst possible time to start doing it was the time I started doing it, basically, given the things that have occurred in the last 6 months. So I'll probably rekindle it, you know, in a few months with a bit of luck. This is my plan. It's certainly not dead. It's certainly still in the forefront of my mind. But let's see. Wife and boy are off the cheap poolside holiday. Any tips where I can also get a kite in April? April. You could be lucky in Europe. I'm just thinking of like Tarifa can be definitely poolside weather in April. Cannot be. And certainly avoid Easter week if you are going somewhere like that, because Spain generally get bonkers Easter week. I would imagine realistically you'd be looking at traveling further afield. Egypt, maybe in April. I'm not a massive expert on Egypt. but I would think that's probably working Egypt time. Apart from that, I don't know how far are you willing to travel, able to travel, Matt? Because apart from that, I think you'd be looking further afield, really. Hey, Caleb, how are you, sir? Alvaro, that is awesome, mate. That is awesome. Don't worry, the walk of shame is part of it. The walk of shame is absolutely part of it. And as someone rightly pointed out on here, walk of shame is a terrible word for it because you should be bloody proud that you are riding full stop. So take the walk of shame as the walk of pride and feel very happy that you're doing it because you've just managed to ride to get yourself there. So let's start a movement to stop calling it the walk of shame. But no, awesome, mate, awesome. And it's part of it. And to be honest, you'll be doing it for a long time. And even when you start to ride upwind, you will still be doing the walk of shame. I guarantee you. Because you'll be riding upwind, but what you need to do is ride upwind consistently. And what you'll find is that like when you turn, you'll lose a lot of ground downwind, you'll lose your board, and then you'll lose a lot of ground body dragging back to it. You know, just make little mistakes, and then you'll keep going back to it. But you're actually riding upwind, basically. Generally, when you're riding, it's just that you're making these mistakes in between. So don't stress. This is where most people start stressing about the upwind riding. You're actually riding upwind. You're just not staying upwind consistently at this point. So that's the next one. But again, it just takes time to work through. So don't stress too much about that. That's the other one, Alvaro, is that people try and ride too far upwind. I would to start with just try and ride across the wind. Don't worry about upwind, just ride across the wind. So just pick 90 degrees from the wind and try and ride in that direction and just stay on that tack. Because the biggest problem that we see all the time is that as soon as someone gets riding, right, I'm going to go upwind, and they start trying to ride literally straight into the wind. And there's just no hope. You know, no one's going to do that. Now, how high you can ride upwind depends on an awful lot of factors: which kite you're flying, which board you're riding, your technique, the wind on the day, how many waves there are, things like this. So I can't give you a direct thing of saying it's 45 degrees. It's in theory, it's 45 degrees. But again, some kites will take you higher up. When you look at foil boards and foil riders, they can go ridiculously close to the wind. Other boards and kites will go a lot further away from the wind. So aim for 90, and that will be a pretty good starting point for you. So I would say start at 90 degrees off the wind and go from there. And then slowly start to pinch up wind a little bit more. And actually riding upwind is really natural. You know, it's a really natural thing to do because it's where it's most comfortable. And you'll know when you get it, because it's this, I always describe it, and it's not like this, but it's almost as if the world goes silent at that point when you get it, because suddenly you've been struggling, riding the board flat, and suddenly you lock the edge in, you lock your body in the right position. So, oh my God, this is effortless. And when you feel that, that's when you've got it. So you will know it instantly. It's like, there we go. That's the feeling I'm after. That's the sensation that we're after. Boom, locked in, and off you go. And don't stress too much about, you know, how high am I going upwind? How far am I going downwind to start with? Because that's when people start to stress and start to lose it. Just 90 degrees and you'll be cool from there. Yeah, not too far. Okay. Yeah, I would say check out Egypt. I'm not sure about Egypt, but I think that's pretty much around. The other place, obviously, actually thinking about it, is Canaries. The Canaries would be, you know, obviously that's going to be warm. That's going to be it's going to be windy at that time of year. So the Canaries would be somewhere I would definitely look at for that. That's probably going to be your easiest, kind of closest option that's going to be in season. Tarifa's reliable for wind all year round, mate. It's just that typically what always bloody happens is Easter, and around that time, because it's the first week of the year when all the businesses can really earn money, it pisses it down, and no one it ruins that entire week. So Easter week in Tarifa is generally always windy. It's always rainy. Sorry, just sod's law basically. Now I'm not sure when Easter is this year. I'm not sure if it's early or late or whatever. But for wind-wise, you know, it's reliable all year. There's no windy season in Tarifa. It's just sun-wise. I mean, you can get rain in Tarifa up to June, really. April, it's starting to get more reliable, but April in Tarifa is very similar to April in the UK in that you can get 4 seasons in one day, sort of thing. I would say really that the May is when it starts to get guaranteed. You know, you're not going to get kind of 3-4 days of rain. You can still get that in April. So I would say May, if you're hedging your bets, is a better time to head out than April. Generally, I mean, who knows? Who knows what's going on with climate change and the weather these days? But that's been my experience over the last 10 years for sure. Alvaro, do that, sir. Do that, sir. Yeah, let me know. Let me know. I'll be intrigued to hear how you get on. You know, Kayed, I have never been to Cape Town. This is one of my great tragedies of my life. I've never been to Cape Town. But what I do know about Cape Town is if you are intimidated by the waves, because, yeah, there's a lot of beaches with big waves. There's a lot of beaches. So big at Langebarn, which is, and I believe, about 30 minutes drive out of Cape Town. So that's very similar to what you get in Egypt, kind of big, flat, open water lagoon. So that would be your other option there. So don't stress too much if waves aren't your thing. There's a huge lagoon there. And as I say, you know, you can always travel around the coast. There's always beaches on the other side, depending on which way the swells come in, things like this. So there's always spots you can go to, whatever. But just hit the locals when you're down there. But I certainly know that Langebarn is a dead easy alternative to if you're not after the waves. Okay, guys, I'm gonna have to shoot, so I've got a scheduled thing that I didn't even realize was at the same time, starting at past. So if you're any last minute questions, stick them in the chat. Otherwise, I'm afraid I'm going to have to shoot. But I will see you at the same time next week. Or obviously, I will be back in the group. Sorry, I've been a bit lax in the group this last week and a half, simply because there's been a lot going on here. But I will be back in the group and on it from now. So from Monday, realistically. So if you've got any questions over the week, stick them in the group as always. That's the Facebook group, Tantrum Kitesurf Facebook group. Okay, it looks like that's it, and it looks like my time is coming to an end, guys. So thank you very much for joining us today. Sorry it was a bit of a quick one. We'll have a proper hour-long session next time. As normal, any questions, bang them in the group. And I will speak to you next week. Have a great weekend, guys. Hope you all get kiting. Those of you who are going on holiday, have great holidays. And I hope to see some of you on the beach. Cheers, guys. Goodbye.